Yo, Chef Squad of YouTube, and what's up? Welcome back to a brand new video. And today, I'm going to be doing a tier list for the World Championships coming up. I've compiled a bunch of decks that have been seen playing online tournaments. Either they get decent placements or they're experimented with multiple times. And I put them into one tier list and try to do my own opinion on what I think are the plays for the World Championships for 2022. Before we get in the video, make sure y'all leave a like on the video. And of course, leave a comment down below what you think of the tier list and my ranking and everything. I may or may not have the right opinion. I don't know. Also, make sure if you're going to be going to get anything at our sponsor, Atlas Collectibles, make sure to use the discount code TSS12. Yes, to get a 12% discount on your purchase, which is insane. 12%. Yes, use that code TSS12. Let's get into the tier list. All right, so here is the tier list I have created for the World Championships 2022. Now, I have included quite a few decks on this list that I've seen in online tournaments. There's a lot of decks that I realistically could have put in here, but I think most of the decks that I probably would have put in here would have just ended up in the meme tier. But speaking of the tiers, I do have a bunch of different tiers here. We have the BDIF, aka the best decks, and I think the best decks to beat. Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3, meme tier, where the deck is probably just a meme and not very good. And then we have the sleeper tier, where I think the deck actually has potential as a sleeper deck that people won't really expect or really be able to beat because they didn't really, build their deck around beating that type of deck. So that's how the tier list is going to go. And let's start things off here with probably the two best decks in the standard format right now and easily the place for Worlds. Arceus Inteleon, and then, of course, Palkia Inteleon, which are obviously going to be the two big decks to beat going into the World Championships. I mean, no one's going to argue these two decks are the best two decks in the format. I think Palkia is probably the best deck, behind. I think Palkia is better than Arceus, in my opinion. I think Palkia V-Star, I mean, it's just an insane deck, right? Palkia Inteleon is pretty good, and Arc Intel is just right behind it. Now, I don't know what the best Arc Intel list is. I don't know if it's just straight Arc Intel with the Charon's Care, just straight consistency, or if you want to experiment with different tech cards. I've seen some RCs Inteleon lists squeeze in extra cards like Zapdos V and Radiant Charizard is another big one. So I don't know if an RCs Inteleon with a Radiant Charizard is good, or RCs Inteleon with just the straightforward super duper consistent version is the best way to play it. But I do think these are the two best decks in the format right now, and the two decks to beat going into the World Championships. I think that if your deck is not designed to beat these two decks, you're probably not going to have a good time at the World Championship. So I really think that these are the two best decks. I don't think anyone's going to deny that. Arceus Inteleon and Palkia Inteleon are the two BDIFs and the two decks to beat going into the World Championships. Now, I do have a lot of Arceus decks here because Arceus is just that good of a card. But we have RCs Flying Pikachu bad. Now, I'm going to put this in Tier 1. I think this is probably the best, Arceus VMAX deck out there. If you're going to pair Arceus with any card, I think outside of Inteleon, I think Flying Pikachu and Crobat is, the way to go. Now, this deck is still kind of in a weird spot. The deck has a pretty good Palkia matchup. Obviously, being able to just build up Flying Pikachu against Palkia is really good. And Pikachu just destroys Palkia. This deck has a very good Palkia matchup. And the Crobat's pretty good, too, against Mew, which thankfully Mew has started to, kind of come back into the format as, a good deck. And then, obviously, Mewtwo V-Union is, pretty popular, too. And that gives you a pretty good type coverage. And I've even seen some people experiment with a version of this deck where they actually try to squeeze in a fighting Pokemon, whether it be Hisuian Decidueye V V-Star, Lucario V or V-Star, or even Galarian Zapdos V, which I think could be the way to go. I think if you're going to play Arceus Flying Pikachu, I think you have to play, a type in your deck to cover Arceus, because I think this deck, Arceus Flying Pikachu is cool, but it has a really bad Arceus Inteleon matchup, and I also just don't think it beats a lot of decks that have a lot of healing, because its damage output is it's bad. At most you're doing 200 damage with Arceus with 3 basic energy. It's a pretty weak deck, and it really is only good at beating stuff like Palkia and sometimes Mew VMAX. But I will say, though, that if you want to maybe experiment with a build that uses a fighting Pokemon, I think it's a great idea. You could even try out Hisuian Decidueye, because you add in the Hisuian Decidueye, you don't have to play the Phoebe for the Miltank, and then you also get access to a pretty good attacker against Arceus itself, because I don't think many people are going to be running Dunsparce in their Arceus list going into Worlds, and I think that you can take advantage of that and just kind of play a good fighting Pokemon in your Arceus Flying Pikachu deck. I think the deck is good. One of the benefits of it is probably the best, Marnie Path deck in the format right now, where, a lot of this deck's win condition is not only type coverage, but also spamming Marnie and Path of the Peak at once, which is a very deadly combo right now. Marnie is pretty good right now, and this is one of the best decks that actually gets to abuse Marnie like there's no tomorrow. So I think that this deck has a lot of potential. I think it's still pretty good. I don't know if Azul's winning list is the best way to play anymore. I think maybe it has to adapt to the format, but I still think the deck is really good. It's a very safe pick for Worlds, also. I feel like if you really don't know what to play, I think this is honestly like a really good, just safe, straightforward pick because the deck can beat Palkia. I think it can beat a lot of decks, and if you experiment with your build, I think you can have a favorite Arceus matchup. Next, I want to look at Arceus Mewtwo v Union, which I'm actually going to put in tier 3. I don't think this deck is like that good. I know that it's like kind of scary when you play against it, and like when it gets that Mewtwo in play, it's scary. The problem with the deck is it's very high rolly, where it's like you basically have to get the Mewtwo into play on like your next second turn, or you also have to not prize Mewtwo pieces, which can be very tough to deal with when you do, because otherwise the deck is basically just like a mediocre Arceus like deck. Like it's basically just an Arceus deck with no draw engine, no Charon's Care. You do have Hyper Potion, which can be kind of cool, but like other than that, like the deck is like pretty mediocre without the Mewtwo. So you basically just pray Mewtwo is not prized, and in like a best 2 of 3 scenario, prizing the Mewtwo is like probably going to happen at least in one of the matches. So I don't know. The deck is good. Don't get me wrong. I'm going to put in tier 3. It reminds me of like Arceus Duraludon, where it's like that Mewtwo is hard to KO. And once that thing hits the board, I mean, it's unless you're playing against a dark deck, it's pretty annoying to play against because that thing like basically is invincible. Like you can heal against a Palkia and Arceus decks with that super regen attack. It's one-shotting stuff. It has a spread attack. The deck plays heavy Tool Jammer to help against like Ice Rider and stuff. And I think that's one of the benefits of the deck. But it's still kind of a tier 3 deck. Next up is Arceus Coco Decidueye. I'm going to put that in tier 3 too. Part of me wants to put it in the sleeper tier, but I think the deck does have enough respect right now where it shouldn't be a sleeper deck. I am going to throw it in tier 3 though, because the deck does get a bit of respect. I think the deck's actually really good. I'm actually going to say it's better than Arceus Mewtwo, mainly because it's basically like Arceus Flying Pikachu with like a twist. One, the big twist is you have a Coco VMAX, which is somewhat better than Pikachu in some scenarios, mainly because you can paralyze your opponent, and that paralysis is really, really good against decks that don't play a lot of switching cards. And there's a lot of decks out there that don't have that many switch in the deck. You know, obviously like Arc Intel plays switch, and then obviously stuff like Mew VMAX plays like 4 different switching outs, but overall, like the deck doesn't, most decks don't play that many switches, and when you're going like Marnie Path into a Coco Paralysis, it's pretty scary, and it can be very hard to get out of Paralysis, and that's one of the benefits of this deck. I mean, there's actually word that like maybe it's just better to play Arceus Coco without the Decidueye. I still think you want to play Decidueye though, because Arceus Coco doesn't beat Arc Intel. Also, Decidueye is needed for Miltank, which I think you do have to respect Miltank going into Worlds. I think that we'll get into it later, but I think Miltank is still good for Worlds. People aren't respecting it right now. So yeah, Arceus Coco Decidueye. I like the deck a lot. I think it's a tier 3 deck. I really want to put in like tier 2, but it's definitely a tier 3 deck. Next up is Arceus Gyarados. Now, this is a tier 2 deck in my opinion. I really want to put this deck like in a higher tier, because I think this is honestly a really good deck and a really good pick for Worlds, because Arceus Jolteon Gyarados is a very, very good deck in my opinion. I think it's the best Jolteon combo right now in Standard with Arceus, and I also think Gyarados is a really good card when combined with Jolteon. It's a very hard card to deal with. Like, it's hard to 1-hit KO, and if you don't 1-hit KO it, it's 1-hit KO and you return. It abuses Memory Capsule. It has 3 attacks that are all really good. You got Get Angry, which, you know, 1-hit KOs. You have an energy removal attack with Hyper Beam, which is really good against decks like Duraludon, and really good in general. And then you have Max Tyrant, which can be really good when you boss something up to knock out, like a V on the bench, which I've done plenty of times. I think Arceus Gyarados is a great deck. If I was going to the World Championships, I would 100% play this deck. I think it's a pretty good deck, and it's got enough like online tournament results where I think it's pretty good in a tier 2. Next up is Arceus with Charizard VMAX. I mean, it's tough to say. I mean, it actually doesn't do bad in online tournaments. It's actually not a bad deck. I've seen it like do okay in online tourneys. I don't think it's a meme deck. I think it's definitely like a tier 3 deck. Probably like bottom of the barrel tier 3. Like it's probably like a tier 4 deck if we're gonna be honest with you. Obviously, the deck is good. It has a lot of power. Like Heatran VMAX Radiant Heatran. Sorry, deck does not play Radiant Heatran. Or bro, the deck does not play Heatran VMAX. I can't talk today. I apologize. I just got the Heatrans mixed up. Yeah, no, Radiant Heatran with Charizard VMAX, pretty good combo. Heatran is really good against like Miltank. It's really good in general because I think 1-hit KOs everything when it gets like 4 damage counters on it. The problem with the deck is it has a terrible matchup versus Water, and Palkia is obviously the best deck in the format. So, and Ice Rider's popular, and of course Arceus Gyarados still out there, and just Inteleon in general is also kind of scary. like, yeah. I personally wouldn't play it, but I mean, people are ballsy to play it, and it can beat a lot of stuff thanks to, like, the amount of 1-hit KO potential it has. So, I mean, realistically, it's probably a tier 4 deck, not a tier 3 deck. I'm going to put in tier 3, because I don't think it's a meme deck. Next up, I'm actually going to mention is Mew. Now, I think actually Mew is going to go in the BDIF status. I actually think Mew is to be respected going into Worlds. I mean, the fact that it has seen such a rebound in popularity and it's actually been putting up the results to prove it, I think Mew is actually a deck you have to watch out for going into Worlds. Like, if your deck doesn't play like Path or Dark Pokemon, you are going to have a very hard time versus Mew, in my opinion. And I think that if you don't have a game plan against Mew, I think you're screwed, because I think people are going to play Mew going into Worlds. Is it a high roll type of deck? Yeah, it's very high rolly, but I still think you got to respect it going into the World Championships. So I got to put that in the... I'm going to put in BDIF. I actually think Mew has enough legs right now where it's one of the best decks in the format. And I think you may have to have respect... You got to respect it. If your deck is not playing Path or, you know, a Dark Pokemon or some way to KO Mew in one hit, I mean, I don't think that Mew's just going to run you over, right? I think it's not going to be good for you. Next up, I'm actually going to mention... is going to be Ice Rider Palkia, which I'm going to put in tier 1. I think Ice Rider Palkia is actually really good. It's got some pretty good matchups across the board. It plays, you know, the Inteleon engine. I've seen some lists play Bibarel. I don't know if Bibarel is better than Inteleon. I think both builds they have a lot of positives and negatives. I think the Inteleon way is probably the best way to play it, because Inteleon is Inteleon, and you get a bit of type coverage, or a bit of type, well, not type coverage, but you get a bit of help against Miltank, which the Bibarel build does not have a good way to beat Miltank. No, but I think Ice Rider Palkia is a great deck. It's really powerful, and it's a scary deck to play against. It's a deck that, like, when it goes first, you can, like, pop off. And the fact that it can OHKO stuff is insane. I think it has a pretty good Mew matchup, too. Thanks to cards like Leon, Choice Belt. Yeah, no, I think Ice Rider Palkia is a great deck. It's a fantastic pick for the tier 1, in my opinion. Next up is a straight Ice Rider, which is basically just a tier 3 deck. I mean, normal Ice Rider is not very good compared to Palkia Ice Rider. Normal Ice Rider is still, like, okay, because, like, it's still like Ice Rider at the end of the day, and normal Ice Rider was pretty good beforehand, but like Palkia Ice Rider is just leagues ahead of the normal Ice Rider deck. But straight Ice Rider has its benefits. I don't think it's that good though compared to Palkia. I think Palkia Ice Rider is the way to go. Next up is Mewtwo Control, which I'm actually gonna put in tier 1 too, because I mean Mewtwo Control is very good. Now here's the thing: this is a deck that like many people won't really respect going into Worlds. Like, yeah, they may play a Dark Pokemon, but, like, will they have an out to a Miltank? More or less, will they have an out to a barrage of Miltanks? Because when you're playing against Mewtwo Control, you got to know that the opponent is going to have multiple Miltanks in a match. Not one, sometimes not even 2 Miltanks. Most of the time, they're going to use more than 2 Miltanks because of cards like Phylene and Ordinary Rod. So if you don't have a great way to just sweep through Miltanks, this matchup is very bad. And I know a lot of people going into Worlds may not respect Miltank. And I think that's a very big deal. I also think that Mewtwo Control is just very good right now. Obviously, has a very good Palkia matchup. It's got a pretty good Arceus matchup. The worst matchup it might have that's good right now is probably the Mew matchup, just because, like, Mew can get to a lot of damage very quickly, and it also has a Shred Attack. You do play a Yveltal, but, like, Mew is still pretty tough, in my opinion. RCs Flying Pikachu Crobat is a little sketchy because they play a heavy count of Phoebe, and then they have the Crobat, but RCs Flying Pikachu doesn't have a lot of dark energy, so you can just spam Crushing Hammer and just hope that you run them out of dark energy, and then their Crobat is basically doing nothing. So that's maybe one way to beat it. No, I think Control's good. And honestly, like, there could be some untapped potential for, like, different ways to play this type of deck. Like, who knows? Maybe Sander is going to come up with a new way to play Mewtwo Control that nobody really saw coming, and he's going to take the tournament by storm. I think that's one of the things. This deck has a lot of potential for that reason alone. Next up is Turbo Dialga, which I'll actually put in tier 1. I think Turbo Dialga is a fantastic deck. The problem is it has some weird scenarios where it's like you rely very heavily on that really fast Star Chronos, and it also is a very bad deck versus Path of the Peak, which is a very popular card right now. But Turbo Dialga, I think, can play Pumpkaboo, and I actually think a lot of lists are starting to play the Pumpkin now to help beat Path to Peak. And I think that Turbo Dialga may be weak to Path, but I definitely think that the deck is pretty good going into the World Championships. And I think somebody is going to have a hot run with it. I think, like, if Turbo Dialga just runs hot, it's really good. I mean, when you're doing that Star Chronos multiple KO type of scenario, like, dude, this deck, like, is, like, so good. Like, you basically win the game if you're doing Star Chronos and taking, like, multiple KOs through your extra turn that you get with Star Chronos. So that's why it's really good. Next up is actually going to be Urshafu variants. I'm going to talk about both of them. We got Melanie Fu first, which I'll throw in tier... I probably want to put it in tier 2, maybe tier 3. Melanie Fu is good because, like, Arceus doesn't play Dunsparce right now, and You know, the Melanie Fu deck has a lot of really crazy strategies with like Blastoise and quick shooting and stuff. I think the issue with the deck is it boasts some pretty weird matchups across the board. Like, you're basically gonna have like a weirder time against like decks that like can't be KO'd. Like, you have a pretty bad Mewtwo matchup, you have a pretty bad Mew matchup, and you also have a very bad Duraludon matchup, which is not something that I would really want to risk. I think Melanie Fu is good. Honestly, though, you know what I think is a sleeper pick for Worlds? I think the Urshafu Moltres deck is genuinely a sleeper pick for the World Championships, because the Moltres Urshafu deck has kind of fallen off. Like, I have not seen it do well in tournaments in a while, and I've seen the Melanie Fu deck more used than the Moltres Fu deck. But I think if the Moltres Fu can adapt to the format, I think the deck is really good. I mean, you have a lot of good type coverage. You have Dark and Fighting. You can experiment with like Raikou V. You can experiment with Radiant Charizard. You can experiment with Zeraora. And you can maybe try to build your deck to kind of adapt to going first, because that's the problem with this deck is like if Urshafu Moltres is going second, you know, to go keep calling, I mean, you're basically just asking for your Urshafu to get killed by Palkia. So that's why I think if the deck can kind of build a good way to go first, I actually think the deck is great. I really like Urshafu Moltres a lot. I think it's a great pick for Worlds. That is going to be a sleeper pick, and I think somebody's going to do really well with an Urshafu Moltres deck. We'll just have to see who is going to do well, whether it be like Tord or the Europeans or just anyone really. I think somebody is going to have a good run with Urshafu Moltres and prove that the deck is still good, because if you can adapt to the meta, I think the deck is a great pick for Worlds. Next up is going to be Blissey Miltank, which I'm actually going to throw in tier 2. The deck is like not really like, I don't think it's doing great right now, but with the way the meta is, I think Blissey Miltank can kind of make a resurgence in popularity. Mainly because the deck is scary to play against, because a lot of people don't respect the Miltank, and actually, you can play Blissey Miltank very well. If you played really well and not reveal the Miltank and maybe bait your opponent, you can punish them pretty badly, in my opinion. Which happened to me when I was playing against this deck the other night in my league. But overall, no, I think Blissey Miltank is a great deck. With the lack of Miltank respect right now, I think that Blissey Miltank can make a comeback. And I think in general, like the way the meta is right now, I actually think it's posed to be in a really good spot right now, in my opinion. So yeah, Blissey Miltank, I'm going to put in tier 2. I think it's a pretty decent pick for Worlds overall. Next up is going to be Turbo Palkia, which I'm going to throw in tier 3. I mean, I know a few people have actually played it and like done okay with it recently, but like the deck's fallen off pretty hard from like after like, you know, its glory days. I think the problem is that our Palkia Inteleon is just a better deck. Turbo Palkia does have some cool things it can do, though. It's a very fast deck. It's one of those decks, you know, you win fast or you lose fast. And it's also a deck that, like, has room for, like, improvement in terms of what you can play. You can experiment with all kinds of different cards. You could even experiment with, like, a Nice Rider in the deck. You could experiment with Lightning Pokemon, which is something that I have seen people use as, like, lightning attackers in the deck, like Raikou and Vikavolt. So, definitely, the deck has potential for experimentation. I just don't know if it's really suited well in the meta right now, like, overall. It's just a worse Palkia Inteleon deck, but it's a okay deck at that. It's a fast deck that, like, can pop off. That's the thing. Next up is Turbo Gengar, which I'll put in the meme tier. I mean, part of me wants to throw it in tier 3, but I mean, Turbo Gengar is just not... I don't know if it's good right now. It might be a sleeper pick, to be honest, because, like, I think Dark is good right now, and Turbo Gengar is pretty insane. Like, it's got 1 KO potential, and it's very fast. It's got a good type right now. And you can just play, like, you know, you can adapt to Miltank and just play, like, anti-Miltank cards, which you can easily do. So I think Turbo Gengar is actually a pretty okay pick for Worlds. I'm going to put in the meme tier, though, because, like, I still think the deck is kind of, like, not that good, but it is good. I don't know. It's hard to explain. It's a good deck, but I don't know. I think it's more of a meme than anything else, but I don't know. It's not potential. Next up is Reggie. I'll put Reggie in tier 2. It's actually started to make a comeback in the online tournament scene. It's been putting up numbers. And that's kind of what I'm basing this tier list off, is like online tournaments and stuff. So yeah, Reggie's like decent right now. I mean, obviously it has a pretty bad time against like Flying Pikachu, but like it can beat a lot of other things. I mean, it has a pretty good Mew matchup. I think that because of the Reggie Alekis, you have an okay Palkia matchup. And Reggie Rock is really good against Arceus. Again, if Arceus Inteleon ain't playing Dunsparce, Reggie Rock is really good. So it's got really good type coverage, and it's also got pretty okay matchups across the board. It's pretty good against like most like 3 prize decks and 2 prize decks, in my opinion, just because of the way the deck is. So yeah, Reggie is a decent pick for Worlds because, I mean, Avery is still pretty popular because people play Avery to counter Palkia. Clap Stadium is still being used in some decks. I know Arc Intel still plays Clap Stadium. But I don't know. Reggie's good. Reggie gaining like Pokestop was a big buff to the deck. Pokestop is kind of insane in Reggie also. It makes it that much more faster and even easier to pull off like a turn 2 attack, which is kind of insane. Or like a turn 1 attack is what I'm trying to say. I get the rest of the Arceus variants out of the way. Arceus Duraludon is a tier 1 deck. I mean, it's a pretty good deck. It does really well in the online tourneys right now. It's a pretty good deck. Yeah, it's a very straightforward deck too. It's a very easy to play deck, very brainless type of deck, which is one of the benefits of the deck. Is like if you're going to Worlds, you don't want to like play something that like requires you to like do a lot of thinking. Arceus Duraludon could be the deck for you. It's got good matchups across the board, in my opinion. It puts a lot of pressure on Miltank decks, especially Mewtwo, where it's like you're forcing them to get that Mewtwo down ASAP because you're just going G-Max Pulverization, kind of susceptible to cards like Crushing Hammer, but who knows, maybe Arceus Duraludon can adapt to the meta. All right, now we got a bunch of other Arceus decks that I have here. Arceus Counterbox is a meme. I think Arceus Counterbox is a cool idea with like all these big V Pokemon like Raikou, Ditto V, Moltres V. I think it plays like Radiant Charizard and like Zamazenta. I think the deck is just kind of weird though, because like if you go build up a Raikou with Arceus, they just boss knock it out. It's like, well, okay, back to square one we go. I think it's a meme deck more than anything else. I don't think the deck's like that good. It's definitely a meme. Next up is Arceus Beedrill. Now I'm gonna put that in the sleeper tier. I'm actually gonna put Arceus Corviknight in the sleeper tier too. Both of these Arceus decks I actually think are sleeper picks for Worlds because they both kind of do kind of interesting things right now. Corviknight, I've been experimenting with a lot. I've done okay with it in online tourneys, and I played it to get second place at my local league this past weekend. And Corviknight's pretty cool. With a Choice Bell and a Goon Ping, you can do 280 damage. Corviknight has a free retreat cost, which is really good. And it also has a metal type. So going into an Ice Rider matchup, you just basically farm Ice Rider. And if Ice Rider is something that a lot of people are eyeing up, hey, it's a good deck. Also, you just play with Crobat VMAX. It's basically just Arceus Crobat Corviknight is basically what the deck is. You play with Crobat VMAX, and you get the ability to use Crobat VMAX to like kind of help you against Mew. You can play Path, obviously, and Corviknight takes 1 at KOs, which is really good. You get to play the Goon again, which is really nice because it means you can play more aggressive with Arceus V-Star, like Goon Choice Belt combos. Something that like other Arceus lists don't abuse outside of Arc Intel sometimes. And then Arceus Beedrill, the reason I put it in sleeper tier is because Beedrill is kind of cool right now. Obviously, Special Energy is not very popular. I mean, some decks don't play it. Obviously, Palkia and Talion doesn't play Special Energy, but Mew VMAX does. Beedrill is really good against Mew. You can just persisting knock out a Mew instantly instead of having to play like some weird Marnie path or like Roxanne path or a dark Pokemon. Sometimes persisting gets you over the edge, and Beedrill can be pretty good too. It's an okay attacker against Miltank, obviously. Yeah, I think Beedrill's pretty good. If you put a path in play, you can instantly knock out Mewtwo V Union, which is kind of cool. Mewtwo's ability makes it so it can't get knocked out by Beedrill if it has a Twin Energy on it, but if you go Path the Peak, you can instant knock them out with persisting. Just thought I'd point that out. No, I think Beedrill's actually kind of an underrated card for Worlds. I think Arceus Beedrill is the way to play it. I don't know what you would pair it with, whether it's like Arceus Beedrill, you know, Crobat, Arceus Beedrill Charizard, Arceus Beedrill Flying Pikachu. I don't know. I think Arceus Beedrill is okay though for Worlds. Next up is Arceus Lucario. I mean, probably a meme. I mean, Lucario's kind of cool. It does a lot of damage. I mean, it hits the sweet spot of 240, 270 with a belt, and it's a fighting type, which is kind of cute. Kind of a meme, though. I don't think Lucario is that good compared to, like, Decidueye, because Decidueye gives you an out to Miltank. Lucario doesn't, which is kind of the benefit. And then we have Arceus Malamar, which I'm actually going to throw in the sleeper tier. Arceus Malamar Gyarados is basically the deck that I'm talking about. Or Arceus Malamar Jolteon, sorry, not Arceus. Yeah, Arceus Malamar Jolteon, not Gyarados. It's the same thing, though. It's the Arceus Jolteon engine, but with Malamar instead of Gyarados. And I think it's all right for Worlds. I mean, it's a pretty good, like, disruption deck. It reminds me a lot of, like, Zorogarb in that way, where it's like you Max Jammer, Roxanne them. Roxanne is a big upgrade to the deck. Like, Roxanne Malamar is really good, and with Jolteon in play, you have a really easy time against Inteleon decks, because when you Malamar an Inteleon deck, and you don't have a Jolteon in play, a lot of the time, if they just have a way to get shady dealings, it's like, okay, my Max Jammer essentially was pointless, right? I just did 180 for nothing, effectively. But with Jolteon, it's really powerful. Bibarel's obviously popular, but you can knock out the Bibarels, and then you're chilling. Also, I think Malamar is good right now, because if Mew and Mewtwo are popular, there's a good reason to play Malamar. So, yeah, I think Arceus Malamar with Jolteon is a sleeper deck for Worlds. Next up is Stonejourner. I'm actually going to put that in tier 3. The deck like saw like a bit of resurgence of popularity and actually started to put up the results, but I think people have realized it's fallen down a little bit. I think it has a really bad Mew matchup because Mew just scales damage really quickly with Melodious Echo and Fusion Energy. It has a pretty bad Dialga matchup. Its matchup spread is like kind of awkward. It's not bad against Palkia and Arceus though. I think it's a tier 3 deck. I think everyone can agree on that. It's tier 3. It can be fun to play, though. Next up, we have the 2 Inteleon decks I've got. We got Inteleon Moltres and then Inteleon Charizard. I mean, they're kind of the same deck. I think both of them actually deserve to be in Tier 2. Maybe even Tier 1 for the Inteleon Charizard build. I think both builds are technically going to play Charizard, but you get my point. Like, they're both kind of similar deck ideas. I think they're both Tier 2 decks. Maybe even Tier 1. Again, there's a world where Charizard is really good right now in the format. It hits the right numbers, really good, kind of underrated. The Inteleon engine is the way to play it because it allows you to search out the stadiums to get rid of Path and stuff. So, yeah. And a lot of people are saying that, like, for their predictions for Worlds, a lot of people are saying that we are going to see a Radiant Charizard deck win Worlds or do really well at Worlds. So, you got my money on it. Yeah, I know. Inteleon, Charizard, and maybe whatever Moltres Inteleon deck is out there. I think they're both good picks for Worlds. Next up is the Lunar Rock deck. I'll throw that in Tier 3. Look, Lunar Rock is, let's be real, it is more of a meme ladder deck than anything else. But to be fair, this deck for some reason does well in online tournaments. I have seen countless times when I go on an online tournament that was like full of like 100 plus players. Sometimes I see Lunar Rock in like the top 8. I'm like, what? Sometimes I even see it in like winning the tournament. It's like, what? So I don't know. I mean, somehow the deck does do well in online tournaments. I don't actually think the deck is that good, but I mean, I gotta put in Tier 3. I gotta give it a bit of respect. I think somebody will play it to Worlds just for the meme, and I think that could be a reason alone. But, I mean, its matchup spread is pretty abysmal, to be honest. Other than, like, maybe you can beat Urshafu. And then we got Mewtwo Lunar Rock, which is probably a Tier 3 deck, too. But I think it's the better Lunar Rock deck. Mewtwo V-Star gives you a lot of benefits. 1, it gives you a big one-hit KO attacker. 2, it gives you now to Flying Pikachu. And 3, Mewtwo is very good right now, and you can kind of combine the two together for a really good combo where you can go Mewtwo 1-hit KOs, and then you can use the Lunatone as backup attackers. And you can also use it against Miltank, which is really cool. So yeah, I think Mewtwo Lunatone Soul Rock is a pretty good deck. The problem is, the reason I'm not putting it any higher, because honestly, I think the deck could be a Tier 2 deck. I think the problem is not enough people are playing it to make it go higher. But I actually think the deck is a good deck, and maybe even a sleeper pick for Worlds, which maybe is where it actually belongs. You know what? Yeah, no, screw. This deck is a sleeper pick. Yeah, people do play to online tourneys, but like people don't respect it enough or play it enough. It's not a Tier 3 deck. I'm gonna put this in the sleeper tier. This is a sleeper deck in my opinion. Next up is Mad Party, which is a meme. I mean, Mad Party's cool. It can do a lot of damage on the first turn, but like it's just kind of not that good, to be honest. Especially against Inteleon. Next up is Crobat Hit and Run. I've seen some people like experiment with that on PCGO's tournaments with like Weezing and Miltank and stuff. Kind of a meme deck. Crobat Weezing is a cool idea. Weezing is actually pretty good right now in general, in all honesty, but like I don't know if Crobat is the best way to play it. And speaking of like weird dark decks, Samurott I think is a meme deck too. I kind of want to call it a Tier 3 deck because some people do play to online tourneys and do okay with it, but I mean, realistically, Samurott is just a worse Ice Rider. And yeah, you have a good type. The problem is your good type doesn't let you 1-hit KO Mew VMAX, and that's kind of the problem that I have with Samurott. Next up is Darkrai. I think Darkrai and Darkrai Weezing, like Turbo Darkrai, Darkrai Weezing, are both Tier 2 decks. I mean, honestly, I gotta respect the Darkrai decks. I mean, Darkrai's actually been kind of doing good in online tourneys recently. I've seen it make multiple top cuts before. Over the past little bit, Darkrai's kind of become an actual legit deck in the meta. The problem is it has a very bad Palkia matchup, which is the thing that turns people off from playing it. But it is decent, and it hits high numbers. It 1-hit KOs things. I think the other issue with this deck is it struggles against even Mew, which might be weird to say because you're playing a dark deck. But yeah, no, Darkrai is actually not great against Mew because Mew VMAX is very good at 1-hit KO in your Darkrai Vs, and your V-Stars are very easy to KO too. So believe it or not, Darkrai's Mew matchup is actually kind of shaky, but it's not bad at all. I think it's a Tier 2 deck. Maybe bottom of the Tier 2, but still Tier 2. Next up is Zorobox, which, I mean, I guess I'll throw in the sleeper tier because, like, people play it to online tourneys. They don't do well with it, but, like, I think the deck is still okay. I mean, the only issue I have with the deck is it doesn't really have a good matchup versus Palkia, which is the only problem. But, like, Slowbro's kind of insane. I think there's a lot of different ways to make this deck work. There's a lot of different versions of it. You have Wormadam, you have Cleaver, you have a lot of different types to choose from. You have, like, Golisopod, which is kind of cool. You have Slowbro, which is insane. You have Mightyena, which is really good against Mew. Like, Zorobox has, like, a free Mew matchup, basically. I'll say it's a sleeper deck. I think somebody will play it and, like, do well with it. I don't know. I'm going to say it's a sleeper deck. I don't want to call it a meme deck, because I don't think it's a meme deck. You know what is a meme deck, though? Dragapult VMAX. Yeah, it had, like, a brief surge of popularity, and then people realized it sucked. It's a meme deck. It's a cool idea. Like, it's a cool deck. It actually has a lot of cool things it does, like Marnie Path, Roxanne Path. It has a Shred Attack, which is kind of cool. Doesn't do much else, though, and its damage output is very weak, too. Also gets caught in the crossfire of, like, dark Pokemon becoming useful again. Sylveon is probably a meme deck. I like Sylveon, but, like, Sylveon's only good when, like, Urshafu is good, and I feel like at that point, you're just better off playing, like, Arceus Pikachu, which is, like, a better Arceus counter box type deck anyways. Next up is Flaffy Box, which is a meme deck. It's a cool meme deck. It's a fun meme deck, and I think Raichu V is kind of interesting, and I think Raichu V is kind of insane, to be honest. It lets you take big 1 KOs, but let's be real, Flaffy's a meme deck. Next up is Frostmoth Box. I'll throw that in tier 3. Yeah, the deck's not bad. Is it, like, something you gotta respect? Not really, but you know what? Frostmoth Box is okay in the meta, in my opinion. It's actually not a bad deck in the meta. I think it's a tier 3 deck. I don't think Frostmoth Box is a meme deck at all. I think it's actually a tier 3 deck, because I've seen people do well with it. Inteleon, I'll throw that in the sleeper tier. I think Rapid Strike Inteleon is actually kind of cool right now, because not many people expect it, and Inteleon actually does okay in online tourneys. I've seen it do well in online tourneys. Looking at some of the people playing it, yeah, Inteleon pops up in tourneys and does well. It's similar to, like, Arc Intel, right, where you're just spamming the healing over and over again with Cheryl. The deck can play Path. You can also experiment with an Inteleon version that kind of abuses Blastoise and Urshafu instead of just, like, a straight Cheryl Path build. You can experiment with, like, Blastoise, Radiant Blastoise, and Urshafu, maybe even. So, yeah, I think Inteleon is a sleeper deck. Heard it here first. Inteleon's a sleeper deck for Worlds. You know, also sleeper deck, Malamar. Mainly because Malamar is kind of interesting because, I mean, it hits high numbers. You could argue that, you know, it kind of loses to, like, Roxanne. I disagree. Like, even though, like, Roxanne is annoying, if you have Octillery and Karina and, like, if they Roxanne you into a Cynthia, you're happy, right? So that's why I don't think Malamar is that bad of a deck. I think it's actually a sleeper pick for Worlds. Still seems good, honestly. So a deck that, like, I actually don't know why people aren't really playing, because I actually think it's a sleeper deck. It also has, like, infinite access to, like, Manaphy if you're really that scared of, like, Greninja. Because you have Rescue Carrier and, like, Rod, you shouldn't really have to worry about Manaphy, like, you know, not being in play, which is another benefit. And with, like, the HP kind of dropping a little bit, with, like, V-Stars being more popular than V-Maxes, Malamar needs, like, less cards now to KO stuff, theoretically speaking. So, I don't know. I think it's a sleeper deck. Orbeetle V-Max. Last deck on the tier list is unfortunately a meme deck. Yeah, it won a tourney. It got a bit of popularity for a bit, and unfortunately it just kind of fell off. And people realized it's not that good, but it's a fun deck to play. Like, every deck in the meme tier is fun to play, and I enjoy it, but realistically speaking, I don't think it's something you want to bring to, like, the World Championships where, like, the best of the best are going to be playing. But that is my tier list. Let me know what you think of the tier list down below in the comments. I mean, look, it's my opinion, okay? It's one man's opinion. Everyone else has their own different opinions on where decks are in the meta. This is my opinion as to what I see the tier list of going into the World Championships is going to look like. This is what I think the World Championships kind of meta, well, not will look like. People are going to bring surprise decks. I think this is what, you know, you got to kind of know going into the World Championships. And this is my World Championships 2022 tier list. Again, let me know down in the comments below. What do you think is the best deck in the format? Is there another deck I should throw in the BDIF tier? Or do you think Mew Arceus Palkia is perfect? Or do you think Mew is not in the BDIF? Or do you think Arceus Inteleon should be BDIF? I've seen arguments where Palkia is the only BDIF in the format, and Arc Intel and Mew are not the BDIFs. I don't know. Let me know what you think. Are there any tiers I mixed up? I don't know. Let me know down in the comments below. Did I miss any decks? I'm pretty sure I didn't miss any decks. Any other deck I can think of would probably end up either just being a meme deck, basically. So, I mean, this is kind of how it goes. All right. Thanks for watching the video, y'all. And if y'all are new to the Shuffle Squad, make sure to subscribe down below. Go check out our lovely sponsors down below. And leave a like on the video if you enjoyed and all that good stuff. And again, leave a comment down below what you thought of the tier list. Thanks for watching, and bye-bye.
The Shuffle Squad is proudly sponsored by Atlas Collectibles, the best place to buy any trading card game product online. Visit atlastcg.com and at the checkout screen, make sure to use code TSS12 to save an unbeatable 12% off your entire order. Atlas Collectibles will ship your product anywhere in the world, so make sure you're taking advantage of the 12% savings with TSS12. If you're looking for PTCGO codes, they have them there as well at atlaspokemart.com. And the best part is, the TSS12 code works there as well. And if Pokemon is not your thing, don't worry. Go to atlastcg.com and see all the other amazing trading card game products they have there to offer.
This video is sponsored by PokeXWord.com, the best place to get your fill of Pokemon-inspired puzzles. New puzzles are posted every Sunday, and it's a great way to disconnect and have some fun. Not only that, but they also host monthly giveaways on their channel. I personally complete these puzzles every week and can honestly say that they're pretty challenging. They've recently added a puzzle with flavor text only, which is a ton of fun. Be sure to follow PokeXWord on Twitter to get notified when new puzzles are posted and when their giveaways are live.
Check out the Late Night Series Season 6, brought to you by myself, Zach Lesage, and the Shuffle Squad. We're going to be running a bunch of sick events for the Pokemon community, and they start on August 30th. So one thing you might be noticing here is that there's an EU time and an NA time. We have one at 12 p.m. Eastern, which works out to about 5 p.m. in London, and then we have one at 7 p.m. Eastern, which should help out a lot of players on the West Coast play in this event. That being said, we still have a lot of cool things going on. Expect similar prizing that we've had for other Late Night Series events. Expect better staffing, expect better tournament experiences, and of course we do have a stream going up for this season as well, and I will be streaming the event on Twitch. That being said, we have the whole season up on the Play Limitless website. Late Night 51 all the way through 70 runs until we hit the Invitational on November 5th. So check that out, sign up today, and support Zach Lesage Events and the Shuffle Squad. See you there.
The Shuffle Squad is an organization focused on bringing light to the Pokemon community. We love everything that there is to do with Pokemon, and we hope that you do too. Make sure you're liking, subscribing, following us, and commenting on this video to let us know what you'd like to see in the next video on the channel. Thank you so much for watching this video in its entirety, and we hope to see you next time.